Hello. Welcome back to Let's Talk Ray Bradbury. If you've not subscribed to the channel, please do. So here on Let's Talk Ray Bradbury, we are working through a collection called The Stories of Ray Bradbury. There are 100 stories in this collection. We're up to number 39 today, which is The Great Wide World Over There from 1952. The way these videos work is I do a brief synopsis and then follow that up with some of my thoughts and notes on what the story means, if anything at all. For the synopsis, one summer morning, an older lady named Cora wakes up and she's very excited. She's very excited because this is the day every summer when her nephew Benji comes to visit for this summer. And she's excited because Benji is literate. He can read and write and she cannot, and he is sort of her window out into the world that she's never experienced, both from her literacy and because of her life in a small rural area far beyond the places that she dreams about. So before his arrival, the neighbor, Mrs. Brabham, comes by. She's got a fat letter in her hand, and she's gloating about it. Says, "Yeah, it looks like a good letter from my Uncle George over across in the next county." And she's been doing this for years, for about 10 years, the best that I can gather. And she seems to be one for big correspondence. And she seems to have an access to the outside world that Cora has never known. So Benji arrives. Cora asks him to write some letters. But she quickly feels embarrassed because, one, she doesn't really have much of anybody to write to. She does have some relatives who she considers writing to, but they're also illiterate, and it would be, she felt, sort of rude for her to send them a letter, even though she can't read, and then for them to have to sort of lower themselves to admitting their literacy and finding a neighbor or friend to read for them. Young Benji, he has an idea. He's got some dime store magazines laying around, and each of them in the back section has a lot of advertisements for free samples and things that you can send out. So they begin writing letters for these free samples, and Cora makes her husband Tom build her a mailbox, and after several days, the mail starts rolling in. Mrs. Babham, the neighbor, seems a little bit put out by Cora's apparent newfound popularity. And that's when, having not heard from Cora in a few days, feeling that she's upset her, Cora lowers herself to going and snooping, and she checks out Mrs. Babham's mailbox, and she finds a bundle of letters that are already open in the mailbox. And they're not even addressed to her herself. So what they will learn is that Mrs. Babham has been faking this all this years. She's pretending that she gets mail from outsiders from the world, and that she's very popular and that she's literate. And in fact, these letters are addressed to somebody else completely. And she just sort of brings them by every so many days and says, "Look at this." So at the end of the summer, Cora still hasn't found the time to learn to read, sort of spending all her time watching Benji write letters for her, sort of neglected to tackle that task. But she gets Benji to do something kind. It gets her to write some letters addressed to Mrs. Babham, and then as he goes out on the railroad on his travels, has them sent to the neighbor lady, Mrs. Babham, over the coming weeks and months, and sort of gives her something to look forward to as well as Cora. Benji's letters keep coming in for about 6 months, but eventually they dry up. And Mrs. Cora sort of watches as her mailbox first becomes inhabited by spiders and later a gopher. And then finally it falls down completely and lays in the grass. But even after that, as she goes out for her morning walk, she can't help but sort of look down and make sure there's no new letters in her mailbox. Once again, a beautiful little story by Ray Bradbury. This one is very much about two things. One is isolation. The other is about illiteracy, and I think those two things are very much connected. Cora is getting on in years, and she's never been anywhere, and she has this opportunity to sort of live vicariously through Benji. But really, it's the illiteracy that is more the isolation than just the rural setting. This applies to me, I think, in a way that having grown up rural, reading fantasy novels and science fiction novels were my escape because I'd never been anywhere, and living out in the country with a distance greater than eyesight to the next neighbor, and certainly miles away to my first friend. I buried myself in these books, and I found my escape. And if you can't read, you can't do that. And now with the advent of TV and the internet, there's a lot of opportunity to sort of escape where you are and to get out and see the world from the comfort of your home. That these people in this book didn't have, and I think people who are illiterate today sort of face the same challenge, even though this was written way back in the 50s. My mother actually still writes handwritten letters to a handful of relatives and gets back big, fat, real letters, unlike Cora's, or unlike Mrs. Babham's, which I think is neat. It's a dying art, but it's not completely dead yet. But yeah, I think the moral here is to reach out to somebody. And I think it's all the more important in this age of sort of isolation caused by the pandemic. So there you are. All right, guys, very pleased with this tale, having read it for the first time this morning. Next up, we'll be moving on to The Playground from 1953. That is story number 40 of 100 in the Stories of Ray Bradbury. That means we've got 60 more to get done this year. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and I will see you again soon for more Let's Talk Ray Bradbury.